Okay, how you doing? All right, good to hear. Well, I'm here to do another little walk today. Gonna do a little tour of a neighborhood known as Crown Heights over here next to Prospect Park. Very nice. Eric, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm in
good.
Crown Heights. I'm going to learn something.
Yeah, don't get ahead of yourself. That's a lot of faith you're putting in me. I like that. But good to have you back. Today we're gonna be doing Crown Heights, guys. Before we start, guys, check out the Patreon, baby. That's how we fund these things. It's very important. That's how I'm able to keep making these. So check it out. There's extras and all kinds of stuff on there. Keeps the lights on. All right. Also, too, just like and subscribe now, baby. You're gonna get lots of information here. So, just do it now. Get it out of the way.
Promises now, huh?
I don't know. The only promise I can give you is that you're gonna learn something. Okay. That being said, we're going to do some Crown Heights today, guys. It's a crazy history here in this neighborhood. A lot of recent history, a lot of stuff you got to know. You have to know this stuff. So I'm going to cover all of it. I'm not going to ramble anymore. Eric, what do you think? Should we just get this thing started?
I'm ready to go.
Let's do it. All right, so starting from the beginning, this area of Crown Heights used to be Lenape Native American land. Let's just get that out of the way. But then from the 1770s until the mid-1800s was owned by the Lefferts family, as in Prospect Lefferts Gardens. Yeah, rich landowners get all the naming rights, but it was the Lefferts families until the mid-1800s when they started to sell off their land. Now, another thing on the east side of Crown Heights, North Crown Heights, is this area known as Weeksville. Starting in 1838, this area was actually one of the first free black neighborhoods in the United States, pretty much. So just so you know, unfortunately, in New York State, slavery wasn't outlawed until 1827, which is super late, especially for a northern city. But I actually talk about this in my slavery video. You should check that one out, a little plug there. But when a lot of the men were freed, one man actually bought some of this land from the Lefferts family over here on the side. His name was Henry Thompson, and the reason he did was because there was a panic in 1837, so landowners were getting rid of their land. They had to make some money back. He was able to buy some and sold it to other black people. So it was one of the first places where you could be a landowner. And back then, land was very important if you wanted to vote. Go figure. So Weeksville is now protected here in this little museum where I'm standing in front of now. You can see some of the little homes and things that are kind of set up the way that they used to be set up. So by 1855, there were 520 free black people living in Weeksville. And in antebellum America, this was the second largest free black settlement. That's right, antebellum, meaning before bellum. Or the Civil War, I guess. They also supported the first free black newspaper here in the United States, known as the Freedman's Torchlight. So it's a pretty cool name for a newspaper, and it's over here in this neighborhood as well. A lot of history here in Weeksville. Everyone knows the Harlem Renaissance and the black culture coming out of Harlem, but there's also a lot of black history here in Crown Heights. And fast forward, we'll talk about this a little later, it also once again became a black community here in Crown Heights, but we'll talk about that a little later. What do you think we move on, huh, Eric?
I think we move on.
You should come check this out, though, the Weeksville Heritage Center. Very cool place. All right, let's keep it moving. So people slowly started to move into this area. In fact, there was a little town called Bedford, which is located kind of on the west end of Crown Heights. A little tavern, very quiet, People would walk down the street, with a little wheat in their mouth, say, hey, how you doing, Mrs. Johnson? I'm doing good. Kind of similar to today. I guess the only difference is today you're like, hey, how's the hip-hop yoga class going? Great, I'm on my way to a vegan smoothie joint. But this house that I'm in front of is kind of typical of the time before it started to get more populated. This is called the Elkins House. It was bought by a man named George and Susan Elkins in 1859. Freestanding, not townhouses yet. Townhouses came a little later. When you looked out the window of this, you'd see lots of open fields. Your neighbor was a little further away. It was a totally different vibe back then. But it was towards the 1870s, 1880s when it was kind of starting to get built up and people started to move in. No, not at all, don't worry. Yeah, you were. Anyways, this whole area here is now the, Elkins House. Kind of a little place that was saved in 2006 by the city at last second designation. Pretty cool. So Elkins actually bought this house. He was a merchant initially, but then as the neighborhood was exploding, he was buying more land and got into real estate because that's kind of what people do when they get in ahead of everybody else. He ended up spreading himself too thin and died with nothing to his name. But he would sell all the land on, there's actually an ad, that's how people know, where he listed himself as a real estate guy. I guess in the Craigslist version of Craigslist back then, I don't know, Jedediah's List or whatever. So it was very different, and certain things kind of helped to precipitate the changes here in Brooklyn, one of them being the Brooklyn Bridge, which was finished in 1883. That's that little under-the-radar bridge that crosses the East River from, back then, New York City to Brooklyn. So these kind of things helped to kind of spur along the development of Brooklyn in the late 1800s, along with other things that they built here in the neighborhood to do that as well, and we'll cover one of those at our next stop. Oh, how casual, just sitting here on a bench. As this neighborhood started to get more, developed, people started to live here more, they started to plug it into the rest of the city. I'm actually standing here on Eastern Parkway, which was actually designed concurrently with Prospect Park by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, the Bash brothers, who designed Central Park. They designed Prospect Park. So Calvert Vaux and Frederick Law Olmsted designed this Eastern Parkway, and Olmsted actually took his inspiration from some of the places in Europe. For example, the Unter den Linden of Berlin, Germany, which I covered in my Berlin video. Holy crap, I did a video on Berlin. Are you crazy? Anyways, watch it. But yeah, pretty cool. And this was actually designed as a path east from the park, and also kind of meant to connect to Greater Manhattan and also Central Park. There was also another one called Ocean Parkway, which is on the other side of Prospect Park, that was supposed to take you down to the ocean. Very simple. Eastern Parkway takes you out east, Ocean takes you to the ocean. I guess very keeping it simple for all of us idiots. But the whole idea was it was kind of plugging you in. So this kind of even spurred more development in this neighborhood. So as it became more connected, it also started to see more and more people kind of come in. 1920s, 1930s, you had other immigrants coming in. Irish, German, Scandinavian, Sweden. They started to move into this neighborhood, started to become more populated. So between 1890 and 1910, Crown Heights was actually one of the fanciest neighborhoods in the city. We'll talk about that at our next stop, but other groups started to come in a little later because it was plugged in. The IND, the A train, was actually put through here, and it brought actually a lot of black people from Manhattan, from Harlem, from the north of Manhattan here. And they settled in here as well. Also in the mid-1900s, you also had another group settle in this area. And we'll also talk about that at another stop here on Eastern Parkway as well. So it started to get kind of filled in. Interestingly enough, Crown Heights was also the home to Ebbets Field, which is where the Brooklyn Dodgers played, named after Charles Ebbets, who started as a ticket taker at Washington Park for the original Brooklyn Ball Club and worked his way up to owning the club, which, very rags to riches story. That's the moral of the story, guys. Start ripping tickets at a baseball field, you'll eventually own the baseball team. Remember that. But yeah, we're here on Eastern Parkway. Let's go to our next stop, show you how Eastern Parkway further made this neighborhood very nice. So as the neighborhood of Crown Heights became more plugged in to the rest of the city and started to grow, remember in the late 1800s, early 1900s, New York City was booming. This is where people with money came, right near the park. That's great. It was plugged in with the Eastern Parkway, and I'm now on on St. Mark's, which is was kind of the crown jewel of the St. Mark's district. In front of houses like this, they're all mansions back then, late 1800s, early 1900s, and the who's who of Brooklyn lived here. You probably wouldn't recognize a ton of the names, but I'll tell you some of them anyway. Nathan Strauss, maybe you don't recognize that name, but he was the brother of Isidore Strauss. They were the co-owners of Macy's. You guys remember Isidore Strauss? I've talked about him a ton of videos because he's the guy who died on the Titanic with his wife, Ida Strauss. In fact, in the movie, they were the old couple that is in the stateroom when the water is rushing in. She actually gave up her seat on the lifeboat to stay back with her husband. Isn't that totes fresh?
I feel like there's a lot of Titanic stories in these videos.
Well, the Titanic was a big thing here in New York. If you guys don't know the movie Titanic, it's where that woman Rose kicks Leonardo DiCaprio off that door and kills him. That's that movie. But also, Strauss was one of the co-owners of Macy's. Nathan Strauss was so important, he's got a town in Israel named after him, Netanya. That's pretty cool. But none of you guys have any towns or countries named after you. I know what you're thinking, bro. You're thinking, oh, what about Chad? Well, that was named way before you, Chad. He used to live on the street. So did Clarence Seamans. You may not recognize that name, but back in the day, he was the typewriter king of New York. Huh? That's quite a title. It's funny how things go out of style. Back then, he was on top of the world, and now no one really uses typewriters anymore. But he was back then. He was very important. Kind of like me in college. I was kind of the DVD king of my dorm floor. Look at me now. All right. Also, you had Thomas Murray, who lived on the street. He was kind of like the right hand to Thomas Edison. Yeah, Thomas Murray was actually the guy who was in charge of, creating the grid, the electrical grid of New York. He patented like hundreds of different things. He patented the fuse box, the different outlets, all kinds of different things dealing with electricity. But you don't know his name because he worked hard and he wasn't a big, diva, I guess. But this is always the interesting part where you realize that people who busted their ass when they were alive and they were so important and so smart and so well regarded. 100 years later, nobody even recognizes their name. So let that be a lesson, baby. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Sorry, it's a little dark, but this is St. Mark's. Pretty cool little protected district of the St. Mark district. This is when it was the heyday. Things were about to change, though. What do? We're gonna keep moving. Yeah. All right, so I've already talked about how different groups came into Crown Heights, the Germans, the Irish, and the Swedish, but one of the big groups was the Jews who came here to Crown Heights, specifically the Chabad Jews. Now, just a little background, in the 1700s you had Hasidic Judaism kind of taking off, and what Hasidic Judaism is basically a return to the Orthodox kind of practice of Judaism, but there are different sects, or what they called courts or dynasties, and one of them was the Chabad Lubavitch. Named Lubavitch based on the town in Russia where it originated. How you doing? And it actually came here and set up shop in 1940 at this building that was actually built in 1920. The eventual leader who took over in 1951 was named Menachem Mendel Schneerson. How you doing? And he actually was the person who basically exploded this kind of movement. There are Chabads all over the world, and it is, I think, the fastest growing Orthodox or Hasidic Jewish movement. There, by the way, keep in mind, there are hundreds of different Hasidim. Some of the biggest groups, one of the biggest groups is the Chabad. You also have Satmar, which is located in Williamsburg here in New York City. You have the Bobover, which is located in Borough Park. So there are different groups, but this is the one here in Crown Heights. And you may know them by their mitzvah tanks, with these giant RVs or vans that go around the city blasting Yiddish music, and they ask you if you're Jewish so they can do the tefillin with you, like a prayer. They always ask me, but my great-grandfather's Jewish, Eric.
I didn't know that.
I only found this out like a few months ago, but I guess that doesn't count, it doesn't pass through the ad. And one of the reasons they came here was to escape, obviously what was going on in Europe, which is, not good, but they've made their home here and it's become the headquarters for this giant global movement. Kind of cool. And one of the reasons that Schneerson, they call him the Rebbe, is so popular is because he is really kind of the person who helped kind of make this movement so popular. And one of the reasons he did it was because he advocated for outreach and advocacy, getting out of Crown Heights, going to the rest of the world, talking to Jews and non-Jews alike. So let's talk about how this group and other groups kind of interacted here in Crown Heights and how sometimes that tension kind of comes to a head. Let's keep it going. Hold on one second. Yeah, okay. Okay, so there's some things that if you live or have been to Crown Heights even at any point, you got to know these certain things. There's a very important event that happened in the history of this neighborhood that you ought to know. Anyways, I'm actually here at 1681 President Street, and this is where the Crown Heights riots began of the year 1991. So you've always had groups coexisting throughout all of New York. That's kind of the history of New York. But we already talked about the Jewish community here. You also had a prominent black community here in Crown Heights. There have been Caribbean immigrants coming here, but also as far back as Weeksville. This has been kind of a destination for blacks within New York City. So these two groups have coexisted, but there's always been tension, and those tensions came to a head on August 19th, 1991, actually starting at this stoop at 1681 President Street. So what happened was, through this intersection was passing the caravan of Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who I've already talked about as the leader of the Chabad movement here. And the person kind of rounding out the back of the caravan was trying to make it through the light, so he sped up and he lost control. His name was Yosef Livch, and he actually hit a 7-year-old Guyanese child here in the front and killed him, Gavin Cato. And actually what happened was there's a Jewish ambulance that came first, tended to the driver, whisked him away, but didn't pay any attention to the children. A lot of anger boiled up, and basically 3 days of riots ensued, made national news. Al Sharpton came, and David Dinkins actually suffered a huge political loss with it because he didn't, a lot of people say he didn't act quickly enough or assertively enough, and in the following election, it was one of the reasons they say that Rudy Giuliani actually beat him. In fact, they released an investigation into the whole thing around the time of the election to kind of solidify Dinkins' defeat. But it all kind of happened, and actually right after the actual accident, Yankel Rosenbaum, a 29-year-old Australian Jewish student, was murdered right near here as well by a mob. So it was a total mess, and Lemrick Nelson was arrested for that. He was tried. He was actually convicted of civil rights charges, federal civil rights charges, and went to prison for a year. But it was a whole back and forth. And Livich, the driver, they said was an accident. So the people here felt like he didn't get his own, I guess, accountability for what happened. He actually went back to Israel from here. He left for Israel very shortly right after the accident. So it was a whole kind of thing that kind of began right on this step. The stoop in the year 1991. One of the most serious riots in the history of New York City happened here in Crown Heights. And people here walking around all the time, they don't even know it. So this is definitely history in this neighborhood that you ought to know.
Oh.
Sorry, I don't know, whatever. You gotta try to lighten the mood here. But it's a serious thing that happened, and it happened right here on President Street. But you know, today they actually have you know, festivals and things like that that try to repair and have continued to try to repair this bond between the two groups that have coexisted here for so long. But I guess that's one of the things about New York. You have all types of people kind of living in the same place, very close quarters, and it's actually kind of a miracle that New York functions at all. But you know, there are trying times, and this is one of them here in Crown Heights. But the neighborhood continues to change and continue to grow despite different groups and new groups coming in. We'll talk about that at our next stop. What do you think, Eric?
Good.
That wasn't so bad. I know it's a serious topic and everything, but I think we handled it all right. All right, let's do it. Okay, so all of this begs the question of where is Crown Heights going today? Well, it's starting to get a little bit more expensive around here. You can see signs of it up, for example, a little further north here. They got the area known as Prospect Crown Heights, like kind of the border. They're calling it Pro-Crow. Pro-Crow. Yeah, they're giving them one of those little abbreves that the kids love so much, but also the real estate developers love so much because it makes it more exclusive, makes it interesting, rebrands, that whole thing. All following the lead of Soho, south of Houston back in the day. You know, Tribeca, Triangle Below Canal. We all know how insanely unaffordable those neighborhoods are today. Well, developers and neighbors like this are like, please, please, please make this Tribeca one day. So we'll see. But that's, you know, you should always be a little suspicious when you see a new abbrev pop up. You know, like Sobro in the South Bronx, all this kind of stuff.
That's not real.
It's a real thing, man. I hate to break it to you. Sorry, Eric. But always be a little bit suspicious, always be a little bit skeptical, that stuff. And if you disagree with me, hey, go to hell. Okay. Keep in mind, in New York, people don't really own very often. In fact, in 2014, the national average was about 63% of home, you know, people were homeowners, as opposed to New York, where it was like 31%. And then within New York, it was like 26% of black people and 42% of white people. So even amongst different races, you had different percentages. So in New York, everyone pretty much rents. I mean, me, I'm renting this shirt. You know, I'm renting everything. You gotta rent everything. I guess you can't take it all with you at the end, right? That doesn't make me feel any better. I'm standing in front of 111 Montgomery, one of the recent developments here in 2019. They built this 163 luxury units. Now, it's interesting because buildings like this sometimes are required to add affordable units. People like to point that out. But a lot of times there's three problems with that. One, which is right off the bat, there are not enough affordable units. Two, they peg the affordability on the neighborhood around it. So as the neighborhoods get more expensive, the affordable units, the price and the amount you make goes up. So you're not actually catering to people who need it the most. It's people who are just looking kind of for a deal in these neighborhoods. And three, you should keep in mind that any requirements that are put on any of these developers are fought for, baby. So you got to fight for them just to begin with, just to then keep fighting to keep them around. Things like broker's fees, which were actually they were actually outlawed a year and a half ago. Well, the real estate board fought back for them and got them. And so now you go to some places, you have to pay 2 months rent, you know, just to pay the broker's fee. I don't want to digress, but this is all very important stuff because, you know, the housing market in New York is hot. So people are getting taken advantage of, and it's not like they're selling you a mink coat. You need a place to live, so you got to actually protect these things for people because people gotta sleep somewhere at night. I'm digressing. Listen to me. Go.
Yeah, leave those minks alone, Tom.
Yeah, no minks. But that being said, another thing too is this neighborhood has grown significantly in the last 20 years, but the population of black people here has gone down almost 20,000, and the population of white people has gone up. In fact, this is one of the neighborhoods in the 5 boroughs that has seen the most dramatic decline of African Americans of any neighborhood. So, but you got to be aware of what's going on. And if you want to learn more about this and how it all works, watch my interview with Sharon Zukin, a Brooklyn College professor who is an expert on urban development. Pretty cool. I interviewed her. Yeah, no big deal interviewing college professors. Yeah. Thanks, Eric. Let's go wrap this thing up, shall we?
Let's do it.
Oh yeah, hey. Caught me off guard, look at that. Well, I came here to finish this up, finish this tour up. We learned a lot today, huh? Wow, went through all the history. And I'm not filming this at the beginning because
Why do you do that?
I don't know. Look, I know what I'm gonna say, so it's okay. I know that you're gonna learn a lot. Anyways, we're here in front of the Brooklyn Museum. I'm gonna cover this in another video. I'm still gonna do a video about Prospect Park and all that stuff and cover this then, so relax, okay? But we learned a lot, man. We went through the beginnings of this area of Crown Heights and how it was really just farmhouses. We talked about Weeksville, the first and major African-American kind of enclave here in New York. We talked about the fancy old St. Mark's district. We talked about, goodness, we talked about Eastern Parkway. We talked about the riot, which everyone should know. And now we're here. Now we're here, finishing our very own riot, our own learning and laugh riot.
Wow.
Okay, sorry about that. Look, guys, if you enjoyed it, please check out the old Patreon. That helps a lot. Also, you know, like I said, that's what funds these things, man. That's why I'm able to do these things. So whatever you can do to help on there is a big appreciated. Also, like and subscribe. Just like you did because you made it this far, huh? Am I assuming too much? All right, well, anyways, yeah, I gotta call, I gotta literally call my taxi to come pick me up. But yeah, guys, aside from that, I don't know what to tell you. Eric, what'd you think? Did you learn something?
What kind of minutes you get on that thing, Tom?
It's not good. None of it's good, but it's okay because I don't really need it anymore. I don't need.
I want people to know you literally do use that.
I do use it. That's right. That's my ride. That's the only way I can get around. No more Uber for me. I have to call 911. All right. Well, anyways, guys.
So loud.
Yeah, it's very loud. That's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'll see you guys next time. See y'all later. Sick. All right.